so many of the profile feature stories on women founders or founders of color, they were so much more about this ideal of like a rags to riches story, right? Or here's how hard it is to be female. Here's how hard it is to be X, Y, and Z. And it's like, that's not the question that I'm asking.
Right.
I'm asking like, does your product work?
Right.
What does your user base look like? How are you changing the world? Why is your technology revolutionary? Like, let's talk about the actual business. Have you created a business? Or are we going to just keep asking you about your outfit?
Walking down the street, thinking about her exit, breaking down the steps so every founder gets it. She's the exit whisperer, she's opening the door. It started with a whisper, now that whisper's gonna roar. She just sold her company, and here you get the real story. Shh, you could be next. Walking down the street, thinking about her exit.
Hey, and welcome back to The Exit Whisperer. I am Carrie Kerpen, your resident exit whisperer and host. And today I am so excited to be talking to Sherrell Dorsey. And I'll tell you when I first noticed Sherrell Dorsey. So she had a fantastic company, started as a newsletter, turned into like a data hub around Black innovation and entrepreneurs in the Black and brown and underrepresented spaces. She did an amazing infographic, which I later learned the cool kids call a data viz, around Black female-founded exits. So exits that happen with Black female founders. That's where I first discovered her. Later to learn that she ended up selling the plug to Impact Alpha. And I had the opportunity to have like a real conversation with her about that here. I was so excited that she agreed to come on and talk to me about what that experience was like. And it's so interesting, like so many things come into play in her episode. Like there's market timing and what was happening in the world with investment in DE&I. There is personal timing, what was happening in her world and her physical body and what she learned about herself in terms of the type of founder she was and what stage of business she was best at. And then there's also a whole really interesting element around her team and around what happens when you build a team and making sure that when you make a decision like, okay, I'm ready to sell, how do you communicate that to your team with grace, especially if your team is not a part of the deal? Sherrell is like just someone who totally keeps it real and keeps it real about not just her building of the business, how it came to be, which was sort of unintentional. Then like when it became big, like what was going through her mind, then when she was done, then what she's doing next, like the whole thing is really interesting in terms of her mindset. This story is one that is really moving and one that would and could benefit from some really brilliant, holistic financial planning. So without further ado, here's Sherrell, the absolute best. Sherrell, I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited to talk about the plug because I heard your story, a little bit of your story, when you told it on stage at
the New Media Summit.
The New Media Summit. You were so amazing. And I was floored by your story. And I cornered you and said, you have to come on the show.
Yeah. I didn't have a choice.
You had no choice. There was no saying no. And so I want you to tell our audience about the plug. Tell me about how it got started.
Yeah.
The idea.
So out of all the things that I've ever tried to create, the plug is not the thing that I thought would take off. I accidentally started the plug. And so just to backtrack a bit, I just created this like daily tech newsletter that was covering like Black and brown and like outside of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and innovators and just incredible like technologists that I was finding really fascinating. And I've been working in tech pretty much my whole life to an extent. I'm from Seattle.
Okay.
I always tell people I grew up a Microsoft kid. Like I learned how to code in high school through an amazing program. And then during the summers, I'd work at Microsoft over the summers. So I kind of got trained up by folks from all kind of walks of life, right? And so when I got into a more formal, like professional environment working in tech, I was just really surprised that so much of the news media, particularly in business and tech news, it was just the same cycle of people all the time.
It's like, just like a regurgitation of the same story, rinse and repeat.
And it's like, okay, sure. Like you want to know what Gates is doing, what Zuckerberg was doing at the time because, we had the whole like dorm room billionaire narrative. But I was like, there are all these other cool people who have been in this space who were the pioneers of so much of the technology that we're using today. And so I just wanted to tell a more interesting story. And then someone who had like been from Seattle and then went to school in New York City, like used to being in big coastal cities to a degree. But then I like moved to the Southeast. And the Southeast had its own startup culture. So I lived in Charlotte, I lived in Atlanta, I lived in Miami. I even lived in like Bridgeport, Connecticut randomly for like a year. And every single space had their own hub, whether it was a co-working space or some kind of a small business space. And I had been doing some like side freelance writing for folks like Fast Company, Black Enterprise, just because I was super curious about how technology was starting to completely change human behavior.
Yes.
And so I'd have these fascinating conversations with people that I would meet at conferences, and I was just nerding out all the time. And I said, you know what? If none of these, legacy publications are going to give me my own column, then I'm just going to create my own newsletter. And so I was like, I'm just going to commit to writing every single day because I wanted to get in a really solid writing habit.
Yeah.
And people were calling me the plug because they were always like, do you know who's creating what? Do you know what conferences are happening? And I just knew these things because I had been doing personal research and discovery myself. And so they're like, you're like the plug. And so I was like, actually, that's exactly what I'm going to call my newsletter.
That's so interesting how that name came to be.
Yeah.
So it started as a newsletter.
Started as a newsletter. I was just literally up at 5 a.m. every day before going to work. And I was sharing like my findings. Here are like 5 articles I'm reading. And then here are a couple of folks and startup founders that are just people that I think are really fascinating. I think they have a really interesting view on what they're doing, or I think they're building something really fascinating. And you should check it out. And within maybe like a 5-6 month span, it really just took off. And when I say like I just had like a $10 domain name in a dream, it was like, all right. And I remember getting a couple of, well, I guess they weren't calls, but like emails from like major companies who were like, this is incredible. We would love to sponsor this. And so I was like, you're willing to give me a check for this little thing? And I also had a couple of journalists approach me that I had relationships with, and they were like, we don't know what you're building, but this is different. And this is new. And the way that you're covering Black and brown founders who are not being seen by Silicon Valley by any stretch of the imagination, this is amazing. Like, how can we support you? And so that's when I started to get some hands-on support. And that little bit of like money that I was getting in, I was able to pay folks a little bit. And I just started building this like name and brand recognition. And at some point, maybe about a year or two in, I had to ask myself like, okay, are you going to kind of teeter along and be, somewhat, internet famous in this like very niche space?
Yes.
Right? Are you going to build something that could be really meaningful?
Okay. And so what was the precipice to choose door number 2, which is door number 1 is you pick up some money on the side, you're internet famous, and you're writing a cool newsletter.
Yeah.
That elevates voices.
Exactly. I may have said this on the stage at the New Media Summit, but I started looking at who was subscribing to the newsletter. And I had one subscriber reach out. I think they were from Newark Venture Partners. And I ended up grabbing coffee with this female investor and just asking her like, well, why did you decide to subscribe? And she's like, well, we're expanding our portfolio and we recognize, we aren't really investing in a diverse group of people. And we're missing out on deals and opportunities.
Yeah, they were looking for like the next thing. Yeah. And nobody was covering that subset of the community. Yeah. And there you were covering them all.
And doing deep dives.
Yeah.
Like not just, oh, this is cool, check it out. But like, here's this technology. Here's who's like kind of been working on it, but not really getting it right. Here's their approach. Having real sit down conversations with founders and really looking at big picture. Here's what where the market is going. And so kind of getting a little bit more deep into my reporter and analytical brain to really share also, like we had a section called like by the numbers. And so that was a lot of like market data and stuff as well that I was looking at. So
that's what I was going to ask you. It's a shift from writing to really becoming like a strong source of data.
Yeah.
I would imagine that took a lot more time, more resources.
More time, more resources. And, you still have to be able to tell a proper story. But I noticed that people were getting really excited about the companies that I was excited about. But then also, I kind of gained this analytical, part of my brain working for these other startups. And I just started asking questions about what kind of data does not exist for these particular demos, and how can we start to create original reported long form content that would do deeper dives, because so many of the profile feature stories on women founders or founders of color, they were so much more about this ideal of a rags to riches story, right? Or here's how hard it is to be female. Here's how hard it is to be X, Y, and Z. And it's that's not the question that I'm asking.
Right.
I'm asking does your product work?
Right.
What does your user base look like? How are you changing the world? Why is your technology revolutionary? Let's talk about the actual business. Have you created a business? Or are we going to just keep asking you about your outfit? What is the conversation that we're having here? And so to start asking about the data behind some of these, what I was starting to see were trends, right? So there's this point where WeWork was launching a new co-working space every 59 seconds. There was some weird stat at that time, right? Yes. And at the same time, I'm watching all of these interesting communities, especially smaller to mid-sized communities or mid-sized cities, start to create their own startup centers and ecosystem centers, right? Everybody wanted to say that we are the next Silicon Valley.
Of course, this makes sense from all of your moves when you were in Charlotte and Atlanta and all the other places.
Because everyone was looking at revitalization, downtown, centers. How do we bring people into them? How do we bring grocery stores and transportation? And so most mayors, most governors were how do we keep young talent here, right? How do we keep pitch competitions? You were seeing folks what was the name? Scott Dorsey out of Minneapolis, start to make local investments into infrastructure as well as investing in, once they sold to Salesforce, it's you've got all these multimillionaires now in, the Midwest or Indianapolis, not Minneapolis, excuse me, Indianapolis, you've got all these multimillionaires who are now seeding the next generation of entrepreneurs. So all this capital in these obscure places are fueling opportunity for people to even think about becoming business owners.
So you're covering everyone who is not typically covered by the major publications. It starts to really take off. Do you take in some funding? You take in a little angel investment, hire people? Or is at that point you're still growing?
No.
Oh my goodness.
We were selling sponsorships. We were moving
So you're self-monetizing here.
Self-monetizing. I wasn't sure that venture capital at the time was the way to go. And quite frankly, I was a bit afraid of it.
Yeah, of course.
Right? I was in grad school. I was in journalism school when so many media publications were either completely shuttering or they were losing tremendous valuation after raising
totally. They
a lot of
raised
money.
At a certain valuation and they
I was
end up
terrified. So between grants, there were many foundations and many consumer tech companies, big tech companies who were starting to invest in next gen media.
Yep.
And so over the course of maybe 3 or 4 years, I was able to do $3 million in grants. And then between editorial partnerships, sponsorships, relationship building, we were able to kind of bootstrap, so to speak. And then probably by year 3 or 4 is when I recognized, we have a data product and a series of assets because we're data journalists. Right. So by this time, I'm pulling together this really cool team of computational journalists. We are developing, and when I was in grad school, the entire premise of me getting into this program, this data journalism program at Columbia was, listen, I'm building this company and I want to make this, a formidable data-driven media company. And I need the skill set. Right. And so all of my assignments were stories that I was doing for the plug. And I was doing deep dives into data or having to collect it myself. So all of those data sets that we use for our stories or as a foundation for our stories ended up being these tremendous viral data visualizations, and then
the reports, all of that stuff you did was amazing.
And then underground assets that we were then able to monetize by selling a membership model to our data.
For access. So you knew that the old model for media of sponsorships has a cap, right?
Yeah.
There's like an amount, so much you can do. And
So
it's
much you can do.
based on audience, et cetera. But that your data was so much more valuable than
It was so much more valuable, especially when we started to get inquiries from some of the top banking institutions. And these were folks, again, look, we're trying to expand our portfolios, or, hey, here's who we're trying to recruit into our innovation labs, or, hey, we want to find the next group of builders in the fintech space, right? And so we just had like this kind of direct access and also trust with our audience. And so I think being able to look at like what a gold mine that was and understand too. Now there were some challenges because a lot of people felt like we should just give it away.
give away the
Just give
data.
away our data. Just give it as away as like a public service or a public good. And I think maybe in the beginning, to an extent, we did.
Well, because it's what makes the site valuable. It's what makes all of it.
It drew people in,
Yeah.
right? So when we did data visualizations, I'd post those on Twitter. I'd post those on Instagram, and like they would go crazy, right? And giving people like a view-only look at our Google Sheets, right, to kind of see what does this data actually look like. And so that opened the door. And then as we started to do much deeper dives, like that was a ton of labor that went into these things.
Yes.
And when we looked at the CBN sites, when we looked at Crunchbase and PitchBook and Morningstar, they're like, there are platforms out there that people are using to fuel their work that they're paying tens of thousands of dollars for.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so we're like, we're super niche. We can sell this at a premium. And no one else is collecting the data that we're collecting and the way in which we're collecting it, right? Because a lot of people were using like kind of government overarching data, which doesn't really look at startups. Yes. Just like minority businesses.
Your data was very deep. I remember there was one on Black female founded exits, wasn't it? You did an amazing, like a full data overview. Yeah.
Oh,
I like
out by
Viz.
timeline.
I mean, is it data viz?
Yeah, a little data viz.
A little data viz. I love that. At what point did you go from you're a founder with a newsletter to you're a CEO running a team?
Oh my goodness.
When was that?
I think that transition likely happened when I started like really having employees that I had to meet payroll for and like benefits and pay benefits for and really think about the infrastructure of the business.
Yeah.
And really think about what does it mean to lead? And I always tell people, number one, becoming a founder, building anything you have to be absolutely delusional.
You do.
You just cannot.
Have to be basically batshit.
Yeah, you have to be absolutely crazy because you're like, why would I choose this? This is the hardest thing on the planet. But you believe in it so much and you recognize the only way for this to grow and to be successful is I need other people to come along with me. And you have to be able to move people not just through an idea, but provide the infrastructure for them to succeed, especially if you want top players, right? And not that I did every single thing right, but I also knew what it was like to work for people, work for companies, and work for bosses that didn't see my core value or didn't really take the time to help me think about what my goals are and then even just kind of push me out of my comfort zone to an extent. And so I read like a ton of books on leadership. I looked at, the experiences I had, what I thought, I really valued compared to what I didn't. And I also looked at like how I want to work. I want this sense of autonomy. I love being able to work at the speed that I need to. But then also like if I need to go take a walk, someone's not hunting me down on Slack. Right. And so, and still also valuing the, just like mental health breaks and what have you, or the world is catastrophic. Something absolutely crazy just happened in the world. Everyone, like, let's take a pause. Like, let's take the rest of the day off. Let's reconvene tomorrow. We're not saving lives here. We'll get it done.
Hey, I just want to stop this episode for a second because I'm thinking about being in Sherrell's shoes here. I'm thinking about putting your whole heart and soul into this business. This now becomes like bigger than you ever thought it could have imagined. And like, all of a sudden you realize you don't really want to do it anymore, but like so much of your financial life is built in that business, right? And that's when I think about needing to set a plan. Like if Sherrell had a financial advisor there that was only advising her on her stocks, bonds, and portfolio, it wouldn't really matter. You need a financial advisor that's going to give you the whole picture. And that's why I partnered with Theory Planning Partners. So Theory Planning Partners, which is run by Caitlin Carlson, takes a really holistic approach to financial planning for female founders. Okay, she's built exactly for people like Sherrell and people like me. People who put their heart and soul into their business and need their business to be an important part of their financial portfolio, how it all plays together. It's not just one or the other, and you can't be off balance. You can't put everything into your business and then decide you're done and be stuck. You need something that's a little more well-rounded. And that's why I love Theory Planning Partners. They allow you to take a full look, because they're not compensated under your stock portfolio. They're not all about you must only invest in stocks and bonds. They're about let's look at all different classes of investment, including your business, including real estate, including a lot of things that many, many other advisors are not compensated to look at. They've got a really smart, really reasonable flat fee model. I encourage you to check them out. I know that Sherrell and I both are checking them out. So you have this team. Now we grow. You've got a team. You've got a lot of added responsibility.
Lots of responsibility.
At what point do you get a sensation that maybe time is running short for you on what you want to do with this? How do you know? How do you start to know?
Like I said, I started the plug without really having started the plug.
Right. You didn't know it was going to be anything.
I didn't know it was going to be anything. Out of all the things that I wanted to take off in my life, this was the thing that took off. And so I was really quite literally building the plane as I was going.
Yeah.
And it was again, a transformative experience. Got to be on many stages, got to shake hands with incredible, highly successful people. I got to tell, newsrooms that they were intellectually lazy because they keep asking dumbass questions to founders that don't look like Mark Zuckerberg, right? And some of the goals that I had were, I fundamentally want to change the way that business reporters cover Black, brown, female, whatever, founders and communities, right? I want to change that because it's stupid.
Right. And then it's what are you wearing? How did you do this as a Black founder? How did you these dumb things that are really, rather than so what are you building? Right. How did you do it? Yeah,
exactly.
Totally.
And then secondarily, I had read Bloomberg by Bloomberg, and that became sort of a model that I was able to use for inspiration as we built out our data products. Yeah. And so the other goal I had was I want us to be syndicated on, I want us to be so good we're syndicated on the Bloomberg terminal.
Yes.
And then that happened in 2021. They reached out, to us and was we want these and these stories and this data in our terminal. And I was okay, now what are my other goals? Because we've done this, Business Insider was licensing us. We were partnering up with Wired. And so we earned the respect. We were doing this long form data reporting. And then I think I got to a point where it was okay, great. Now what? What else are we supposed to do?
You didn't, it sounded to me, and listening to you, that it wasn't you had many dreams for the plug. You had dreams for yourself, but not necessarily dreams for the plug beyond that. It achieved what it wanted to do.
Yep.
And it was coming, as I interpret your story, tell me if I'm incorrect, at a cost to you and your own health. You were starting to really experience some of the stress of running a business that reaches that level.
Absolutely. I mean, after a while, I was no longer writing stories. And I love writing stories. I love covering stories. I love interviewing founders. And, I could barely write a story a month, and it was I had a team. I had a team of reporters that were phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I was I just want to write one story a month, damn it. But I had no time as a CEO. It was you got to keep money in the coffers. You got to keep negotiating the partnerships. At one point, I decided I was not going to fly around for every panel or speaking engagement. So I started pushing my team in that direction. And they're deer in headlights. And I was no, you guys are capable of this, right? And they're oh my gosh, you pushed us. And thank you. But also, this is crazy.
Yep.
And then burnout is so very real. And you still take so many hits, right? It's not just the work itself. It's not just the worrying about what resources are coming in, if a deal's going to come through. managing, employees and some of their challenges. It is also just the weight of like, I'm also trying to like ensure that my family knows that I love them. So I wasn't necessarily going to all of the family trips or celebrations, right? That started to take a toll at the time, and the relationship that I was in, like that was like really heavy. And, there just was so many things that you kind of give up to be focused, and not saying that these are bad things, but there isn't balance when you're building something from the ground up. There's no easy way to just, unless you are already loaded and deeply well connected, there wasn't a way for me to not have put in this grind work, right? And I mean, from the stress and, especially you're on the road all the time, you're eating whatever.
Yes, totally.
Right? So we're talking inflammation. I'm sitting in meetings with my team and I'm breaking out in hives and
so you're getting that nagging sensation. Yeah. And also, I mean, this was when, like in the 2022 era around that?
2022.
Okay, so, and the entire landscape of DEI changed too.
The whole landscape was changing.
How it was looked at, how it was supported. Yeah. It all changed.
And I think that like we saw the writing on the wall because we were noticing our internal partners in champions were either leaving their posts, they were being shifted into different departments, and or entirely being, let go. Yeah. And so, I had to take a look at that landscape. And obviously we were covering the Black innovation economy. And even though this was like a material business, objective, data-driven space, right? We still were going to be under the same purview of what a DE&I.
Yeah, you would be put right into that box.
Right,
yep.
Right.
Even though you really belonged in a data box. You really belonged in the space of like
general business.
Yes, and just in general, business data.
But we know how the world, we know how this country works.
We do.
And so for me, it takes a toll not just on the business side, but it is tough. Right? It is super tough. It's super tough also to report when you are hearing the most egregious things, take place. When George Floyd was killed, like we documented all of the tech CEOs that were making statements, right? That was a database that went completely viral. And at one point, we had over 200 companies that had leveraged our data to reshape some of their programs. Yep. So we went from these superheroes to now questioning our existence. Yeah. And so there's the highs and the lows of, are we going to keep fighting the exact same battles and continue to have these like 0 to 1 conversations that every 4 to 5 years get reset? So I think I was burnt out on that front. Yeah. I was burnt out life-wise. I was burnt out. I was like, I just need this like hard reset. And I remember like waking up one day and feeling like I love what I've built, but now I'm also starting to hate it. And I don't know where to go from here.
That's a really, really hard feeling. And one of the things that I know about you that I love so much is the grace with which you handled that decision in the communication and timing to your team.
Oh, gosh.
So you come to
tough
a
times.
Space. Yeah. So you come to that space. Now you have a good team and it's people who depend on this work, and you decide that it's time and you're going to go seek a buyer. Talk to me about how that process went and how you communicated with the team.
Yeah, so there were a couple of, maybe this was like a prayer for like a way out, right? But we had been approached by buyers in the past, and it just so happened to be that on a day I was having a particularly tough time that, I had an inquiry about, us potentially selling. And I thought, you know what, let me like actually pay this some attention, but let me also maybe look for some additional offers. What could this look like? Yeah. And so, and also taking kind of a note from like Alexis Grant's, we got acquired, like you don't want just like this one offer on the table.
That's
like,
right. You need multiple offers.
Right. So I quietly, started to kind of shop around, look at, partners that were aligned. And, for us, it was like, this is impactful, data. We don't just want any person or any company to purchase us, or at least to purchase our assets at the end of the day. And so once I got into a pretty solid place with our acquirer, which I actually ended up approaching them, the other, offers either weren't meeting the mark or they were taking, kind of dancing around and we're just like, I don't have time for this. But the bigger thing for me, Carrie, was I did not want to leave this incredible team that decided to follow me off this cliff.
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave them in a awful position. Like this was already, it's already an awful position.
It's already awful.
But how do I respect them? How do I treat them with some dignity?
Yeah.
Because
the acquirer is buying the data. It's not like they're bringing on the team
and they were like
necessarily.
willing to bring on one person.
But
and then, it's not
the same thing where you're like buying an agency and the whole team stays and it's just pure continuity. This is a real, like you're selling the data and the assets of the business and there's no need.
Yeah. And I mean, there was a negotiation for me to kind of stay on for some time for the transition. But I have also seen like the worst of the worst of startups completely running out of cash.
Yep.
You log into work on Monday or you clock into work on Monday and then they're like, oh, you don't have a job here or we're shutting down Friday. And I think that's the most disrespectful thing because months before you're going to run out of cash.
Yeah.
And so I want to say probably at this time, it's like the end of 2022, I like kind of slowly started preparing the team in just terms of infrastructure and you eventually had a conversation with them. We're probably about 6 months of runway at this point. And I think I gave them maybe 3-4 months heads up. Mm-hmm. And that was like the hardest conversation I've ever had because again, these are people who were like, we're going to follow you to the edge of the earth, and did phenomenal work, came from very prestigious organizations. And I felt like I let them down. I felt like I failed them to an extent. Mm-hmm. And I'm, my team was fully distributed. So we're having this conversation on Zoom. And I like at one point like had to pause, turn off my camera and just like weep for a second. Mm-hmm. And the thing too is that like as a leader, everyone still comes first. So I'm dealing with major health issues. I'm dealing with major relationship issues, like all of the things. And my top priority has to be, I have to transition my team well, right? I have to make sure they have good landing places. And I was able to slot some folks into some really awesome, places like using my network. And then kind of post everything, I was able to bring, one of my team members into some consulting work that I had been doing. And so, being able to keep them on for about another year. But it was tough, but at the same time, Carrie, it was the right decision for me.
It's just, no kidding. Like clearly your body was telling you everything about it. It's just, to me, what's so astounding is that you were able to prioritize the team under really difficult conditions for yourself. Like your whole world was kind of blown up there. Like this thing all sort of happened.
Yeah.
Like, and then there you are. I'm just picturing you. And so many founders do not do the same, do not give the same amount of notice, do not say anything until a deal is done. Yeah. And you really were very focused on making sure that they had a soft landing.
Yeah.
And in turn, I know it was very challenging for you to have a soft landing, but your whole world kind of changed after that, right?
Yeah,
it was personal, and you didn't need a soft landing because you were experiencing it.
I needed a nap.
You needed a nap.
Like I needed a nap.
And you needed a whole life change. It wasn't just the business, it was your relationship, it was everything, right? Everything blew up in that moment.
Yeah, I went to after that, I turned off my email and I didn't really shut down my phone. I just turned off notifications. Yeah. Because once we kind of posted that the plug is unplugging and all that, we couldn't talk about the acquisition just yet because we're still finalizing paperwork. Right. But, I got this beautiful outpouring that I didn't see for 2 weeks, from folks. And so I went to the Bahamas. This was right before my birthday. And I was like, I just going to be with the turtles. And I had to learn how to rest because I had been up. I was working all the time.
I don't doubt it.
And so I had to learn how to get up and do nothing, go to the beach, have breakfast, not look at my phone because I'm waiting on messages or I'm waiting on what have you. It was I don't have anything to look at. What am I supposed to do? It was insane. How do I introduce myself now that I'm no longer running this company, right? And then also at the same time, really recognizing the relationship that I'm in, that I'm in 7 months supposed to be getting married, this is not in alignment. This is not what I want.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, lost my business, I lost my man, I lost all the things at one time. Like, what am I supposed to do? But it was the reset that at the time was the hardest to get through, but also what I knew I needed. And there's something about like the power of moms. And granted, my mom did not know what I did for a very, very long time. Right? Like my whole family, they're very much like Midwestern,
Yes,
like
what
work at
is
the
this?
same job
Yes.
for 40 years and
Yes.
retire.
Yes.
And it's like the first time I think my mother, like I felt like, oh, she was actually very proud of me. My goodness. And I remember like going to visit her, and she just said to me, we are so proud of you. Like you have done more than we could have ever even imagined. And it is okay for you to just rest. And there was something about her saying that to me that felt like,
Yeah, you could breathe.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we sit in rest and sit in stillness, the actual answers of what we want.
yeah,
Because like the whole story of the plug is like, it's this incredible thing that you built. It's incredible, but it sort of just happened. It,
Yeah.
like you didn't, and like when you have that stillness and that time and the benefit of that, a lot of times things can come to you that are more intentional for what you want to do.
so
next.
much more.
Yeah.
I mean, the offers were incredible. I mean, I even had incredible investors. We raised just a little bit
Yep.
of money. And I mean, and that's the part of like winding down and selling, right?
Yep.
I didn't get to just go to the Bahamas. Like
Right.
I had a process
Right.
of learning, not just first my team, I had to take
Yep.
care of my team first. I had to talk to my investors,
Yep.
right? And each and every one of them were like, you did phenomenal. You're an amazing
did.
leader. And being honest and being communicative about like, hey, this is where the market's going. And I can't push this incredible team harder to do the same amount or less revenue than we did in prior years because the appetite has changed. And also, like, I owe it to people to keep taking them to the next level every year. And if I can't do that,
Right.
they don't belong with
Right.
me.
Otherwise, you would have just been on a hamster wheel.
It would have been a hamster
And
wheel.
you would have had complete and utter burnout. And instead, you found a landing for the company. You communicated openly with your employees. And I hope you were able to receive that feedback from your investors and really internalize that and hear it. Because the thing about investing is like, if investing were a lock, everybody would do it.
Yeah.
And like we all know, like sometimes you get a return, sometimes you don't, but it's the journey and it's that process. And what you built was so freaking incredible.
Yeah.
So-
And it was great for the time that it was in.
It was a
and,
moment.
Again, like I'm almost now 3 years removed. And, it's like you're always going back and remembering and learning and recognizing like, wow, like you were able to adapt in so many ways and experiment and try. And you have this incredible story to tell. And the climate and the market changes a lot, but it doesn't negate the prowess of the work and the credibility of the work and all that it's taught me about building. And one thing I also recognize too, Carrie, is I'm a 0 to 1 founder. I don't need to sustain something for 20, 40, 80 years, right? Like let me get in, let me build it up, let me find the right team, let me help set the direction. And then like, let me pull someone else in, who can take it then to the next level.
It's a
right?
very, very important insight for whatever you build next.
Absolutely.
I think to know that space, and believe me, I would bet on you to build something fantastic next, no question. But knowing that you are the one who gets it off the ground and gets it from 0 to 1, and then you need people to help you get 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and take it there so that your gifts can be best used in that 0 to 1 space.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Do you think you have another build in you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I just needed like a year or two at the beach.
Yep. You need
Which
to
I
chill a little
did. I
bit.
frolicked.
Yep. Good. Frolicking is good.
I highly recommend the frolicking.
Yes. One must frolic.
Yeah. I was able to like really work on my health, work on relationships. I hosted like almost every single family member at my home in Miami and like just had
amazing.
these beautiful moments.
It's wonderful.
And I just felt like all of these pieces of my life that were so restorative like, started coming together in a beautiful way. And it's like I got to know my people again, and get curious.
Yeah.
And I never went without opportunity. And I think it put me in a different space of gratitude. When you're first starting that first real company, everything is about the chase.
Yeah.
And it's like now I really get to open up and think about, what do I feel like is so significant to transform? And now I'm not having to grind it out.
Yeah.
I just have to identify the who. Who can help me do this?
Yeah.
Who's the right person? What have you? And so one of the things that also for me was frustrating while I was still working on and building the plug was I didn't see enough innovation around the climate tech space.
Oh.
I felt like there were way too many companies that were trying to solve problems that weren't problems around food delivery and all of these things. So I'm like, okay, fine. However, if the planet is not here or healthy, it's
deliver your food to your planet that's on fire.
Yeah, unless DoorDash is going to deliver oxygen one day.
DoorDash oxygen.
Right? And so
Amazing.
I just knew that I was like, there are bigger problems. And I want to be covering and building in that space and having a different conversation with the next generation that's going to be facing a very different kind of world.
Yeah.
Right. And it's also probably the hippie in me being from Seattle that just was like, I was a Captain Planet kid.
Yep.
And I got to get back to my roots.
I mean, I'm equating the whole thing. When you tell your next story of your next company that you build, you're going to totally talk about when you were swimming with the turtles and that you
all of
I
it.
came to rest and I was swimming with the turtles I just knew, I see your whole arc.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the next thing's is definitely in the climate space. And I can't wait to work on that next piece.
I cannot wait to watch what you do. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me.
Really a gift.
Thank you for having me.